So this is for video 2 for APUSH for Wednesday, April 17th, 2019. We just talked about Clarence Thomas, and now we're going to be talking about taxes and the economy. So Americans were shocked to learn that the U.S. government would pay $250 billion under Bush to save weak savings and loan institutions. I mentioned this the other day that with the regulations coming off savings and loan institutions, which are kind of like a type of bank, basically a lot of them are going to end up failing because they begin to do bad practices. And so under Bush, they're going to give about a $250 billion amount of money or a bailout to help these companies stay afloat. That way they don't hurt the economy even further and cause a deep recession or something like that. Also, annual deficits pushed the national debt over $1 trillion under Bush. So Reagan already started this process where the national debt continued to climb every year. We went from less than $1 trillion to nearly $3 trillion on national debt under Reagan, and deficit spending stays high under Bush as well too, to where his deficit spending will reach nearly over $1 trillion under him. So things were getting out of control, and with Democrats in Congress, he could do a lot of cuts and domestic programs because Democrats would not want that to happen. So he had to break his promise, and in 1990, Bush decided to vote to raise taxes with Democrats in Congress to help fix the deficit spending. So essentially, Bush felt like he was doing what was right. He helped the economy out more and the country and the government more than worry about him breaking his promise. But by breaking his promise, he's essentially assuring that he will not get reelected in 1992. So he breaks his 1988 promise to help the economy. In 1990, a recession hit, ending Reagan's prosperity and raised unemployment. So in 1990, you do have a brief recession hit that ends Reagan's prosperity and raises unemployment. So again, it's not really Bush's fault. This is the long effects of Reagan that happened in the 80s, but Bush just happens to deal with it. So this recession kind of lingers on until 92, and so the economy and the recession work against Bush also in the re-election. Okay, lastly, you have political inertia. And by the way, this is a picture of Clarence Thomas right there in the hearings and whatnot. Okay, political inertia. So Bush really lacked a big domestic program and never really got any kind of really big domestic accomplishment. The biggest thing he accomplished domestically was the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, which is like the Civil Rights Act for people with handicaps. So he signed and passed the Americans with Disability Acts in 1990. That was his biggest accomplishment. But little else was achieved. So he does help achieve civil rights for Americans with disabilities. He also did cut some federal programs, but it made many seem. It made people seem like they were left behind from the Reagan Revolution, that people began to get hurt more by the Reagan politics, Reagan ideas, and so Bush has to deal with all this fallout, and all these things work against him for his re-election in 92. So that brings us to the next president, William Jefferson Clinton. So in the election in 1992, you have a stagnant economy, huge deficits, and political deadlocks. Like we said, Democrats control Congress. So you have a stagnant economy, huge deficits, and political deadlock in the 92 election. And so it fueled a lot of disillusionment. With the government. Bush did run again, but seemed out of touch, especially against a younger, more vibrant Bill Clinton. Because, Bush is fairly old at this point and just seems kind of out of touch compared to his opponent. And many were not impressed with his foreign policy successes. So by this point, the Persian Gulf War was kind of a distant memory. Other things he had done were not as impressive, and so they were also not impressed with that as well. Governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, would be the first baby boomer president and runs against Bush. He comes across very articulate and very energetic compared to Bush. So Clinton comes off as very articulate and energetic. Like I said, will become the first baby boomer president. He called himself a New Democrat. So in 1992, Bill Clinton called himself a New Democrat, essentially pledging that he will not be a tax and spend liberal. He will not be like the Great Society liberals or the Democrats in the 60s and before. He's going to basically have more of a moderate approach, which made him much more appealing to a lot of more swing states and moderate voters, as opposed to some of the last Democrats that ran. So he was a new Democrat who focused on economic issues like jobs, health care, education, and appearing more moderate. So he was a new Democrat who focused on economic issues like jobs, health care, and education, as well as appearing more moderate. There was also a third-party candidate who ran here, a guy named Ross Perot, who ran as an outsider, someone who was not part of the system. He gained about 20% of the popular vote, which hurt Bush as well. So Clinton wins fairly strongly. You can see here the election, and the country's fairly split too. But he wins the election fairly strongly here in 1992 as a result. And Democrats will now have control for both the White House and houses of Congress for at least the first 2 years. So Democrats will control Congress in the first both houses as well as the White House as well for at least the first 2 years. So one of the first things Clinton tries to push is a health care reform. Over 40 million Americans had no health care insurance whenever Clinton takes office in 1993. So Clinton put his wife in charge of trying to figure out a health care reform program, Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton's considered like one of the top 5 most active and involved first ladies of all time, treating it more like a position or like an actual job, more so than some other ones have in the past. So she was in charge of this investigation, trying to figure out how to basically create a national health care insurance program, a government-provided option for health care as well, too. It faced a lot of opposition from Republicans and the insurance industries and small businesses. They talked about how the quality of health care would decline, this would waste a lot of money, this would help greatly increase deficit spending. And essentially, this really hurt Clinton because it's like, okay, well, you lied. You said you were going to be a new Democrat who wasn't going to be a tax and spend liberal. And so Republicans jump on this and say you're being a tax and spend liberal. Like you're basically doing the exact opposite of what you said you weren't going to do. And so essentially the whole effort falls apart. And you can see Hillary Clinton here talking about health care and so forth. But the whole thing fell apart and did not work out. So he fails to pass any kind of major health care reform, but you will see at least one be passed with Obama in 2010 with the Affordable Health Care Act or Obamacare, which is not really a government-provided health care system, but it's the biggest reform in health care we've ever seen, which we'll talk more about that later on when we get back after spring break. Okay, then you have the creation of NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. So you have the creation of NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. So Clinton wants a notable victory with free trade with the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So in the early 90s, he makes this trade deal where we will have free trade and no barriers between us, Canada, and Mexico. Sorry, look at the wrong thing. Supporters said it would help all 3 economies and create more U.S. jobs. So a lot of people who supported this, namely Democrats, said it would help create all 3 economies. It would help, improve all 3 economies, and create more jobs. Opponents said U.S. jobs would go to Mexico and harm the environment because Mexico doesn't have unions, it doesn't have all these restrictions, and so it's going to be a lot cheaper to build things in Mexico, and also it's going to pollute the world more because there's no restrictions. So it was very controversial. This is one of the things that Trump ran against, and Trump is actually changing it as we speak. Trump is trying to make a replacement deal, which looks like will happen, called the USMCA. But basically, a lot of folks thought like it, basically by making it easier to build items out of the country, it would drive a lot of companies to move their facilities out of the country and also create a lot of loss of jobs here in America as well. So Trump has been trying to change that here recently to make it to where he believes is fairer to Americans as a result. Okay, the 1994 midterm elections. So Republicans gained control of both houses for the first time in 1994 since 1954. So for the first time in 40 years, Republicans gained control and have a majority in both houses. They greatly criticized Clinton on his health care reform and being more like a tax and spend liberal, which he promised not to be. So Republicans have benefited from Democrats increasing taxes and federal regulations. So Republicans benefited and got elected because of Democrats increasing taxes and federal regulations. So whenever Clinton saw that they won, Clinton realized that he couldn't do the things that he tried before, and he has to actually be a moderate now. So in 95, he very famously said, the era of big government is over. So in 95, he famously says, the era of big government is over. No more New Deal programs, no more Great Society. We haven't seen anything at that level since that time period. The new Speaker of the House and the leader of this conservative Republican wave was Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich was a long-term member of Congress who will become the new Speaker, the first Republican Speaker in a very long time. And so Newt Gingrich, whenever they were trying to run for office here in 94, he and Republicans promoted this idea called Contract with America. So the main Republican platform of 94 midterms was what's called Contract with America. It proposed three things: scaling back government, cutting taxes, and balancing the budget. So Contract with America proposed to scale back government, cut taxes, and balance the budget. And that's what got them elected in 94. And so in 95, now you're going to have a showdown between a more Republican Congress and Democrats. So basically, the Republicans think, okay, we have this mandate. We get elected to basically be more conservative. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make Bill Clinton have to decide if he wants to pass a very conservative budget. So if he doesn't, and there's a government shutdown, then essentially he's going to look bad, and then he's going to get unelected in 96. So that leads us to the 95 shutdown. So Clinton wanted a leaner, not meaner government. The Republicans wanted to do massive cuts to domestic programs, but Clinton just wanted to make some cuts and not really hurt people's programs. So Republicans give him a very slimmed down budget, and so Clinton refuses to sign it. So as of October of 1995, the government will shut down because neither side can agree to a deal. At this time, this would be the longest shutdown in U.S. history at 21 days, but Trump recently surpassed that with 35-day shutdown back this year in December and January. So the two sides held out from each other. They finally reached a deal in the spring of 96, but the whole plan backfired. It actually made Clinton look better, and Clinton ended up getting reelected anyway in spite of the Republicans trying to be hardline. But what's kind of neat about this is that as a result of this, in his second term, so Clinton does win his reelection, but so do Republicans. So Republicans still maintain control of both houses, and Clinton does of the White House as well. So both realize they have to work together. So as a result, you get one of the last really good compromise governments where they are going to balance the budget and really help the economy in the late 90s. So we're going to end video 2 there.